Hi, Gabe. Hi, guys. My name is Mr. Crocker, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about social studies, and more specifically, we're going to be talking about the end of World War II and the Cold War, and just how that affected the United States. So I'm looking at pages 78 and 79, which will also be in the assignment. But I'm gonna just kind of give you guys some commentary on that so that it makes sense. It's kind of hard to just take that text as a fourth grader and understand what all of that means. So here we go. Read a little chunk at a time, and then we'll talk about it. It says the end of World War II was a turning point for the United States. The country was a superpower, which meant it had a strong economy and military. It also had exploded an atomic bomb. The Soviet Union was also a superpower, however. The decades after World War II were years of tension and conflict between these two nations. Okay, so World War II ended with us dropping a couple of atomic bombs on Japan. Okay, and it ended the war, which is what we wanted it to do. But it also created a lot of tension, conflict between us and between the Soviet Union, Russia. Okay, so that tension, that us being worried about them and them being worried about us, started what they call the Cold War. And the Cold War is called the Cold War because it didn't really break out into uh, fighting like a hot war. There were conflicts. There were areas, places in the country, in the world really, where the two countries had conflicts, but it never broke out into open war between these two superpowers, as they say, which is a really good thing because it might have been World War III. Okay, so both countries were very worried about the other one becoming more powerful and taking control of the world, and so there was this like arms race going on where each country was trying to outpace the other one and make sure that they were the strongest country in the world. Okay, Cold War conflicts. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union was called the Cold War. No one wanted to risk a hot war that would involve atomic bombs, but people were still afraid. The Cold War lasted for more than 40 years. So that was a lot of what we just said. Cold War, tensions, escalating, racing, them knowing that we had an atomic bomb and seeing what it did to Japan, it worried a lot of people. And they also had atomic bombs that we were very worried about. Okay, the leaders of the Soviet Union believed in communism. In a communist country, the government controls the economic and political systems. The Soviet Union wanted to expand communism to other countries. The United States, however, did not want communism to spread. Wars were fought in two Asian countries, Korea and Vietnam, over this issue. Okay, so in the United States, we've talked a lot about how we have democracy, and we also have something called capitalism, where you can go start your own business. The business belongs to you. You have to pay taxes and things like that, but the money that your business makes is yours, and the business is yours. And so in the Soviet Union, the government kind of owns everything, and the money goes to the government, and then you're supposed to sort of trust that the government will use those resources to do the best for the most people. Okay, so that was just a different idea, a different way of thinking, and we wanted our way of thinking to be the way that was happening in the world, and they wanted theirs. Okay, then in 1962, the Soviets, the Russians, right, put missiles in Cuba. Cuba is very close to Florida. The United States demanded that the missiles be removed. The conflict was called the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because of diplomacy, it ended peacefully. Diplomacy is when nations solve their problems without going to war. Okay, so down, Florida is that state that kind of sticks out down at the bottom. And there's an island, several islands down there called Cuba, right? And Puerto Rico is also down there. There are other things there, but Cuba is so close that people swim to the United States. Like they have a raft and it's not easy, but it's close. And the Russians, the Soviets, moved like a missile base, right? Several long range missile type weapons to Cuba. And we found out about it. And we were very concerned because we don't want them firing missiles into the United States. Okay. So this was sort of the height, the climax of the Cold War. Okay. And it also said that there were wars fought in Asian countries, Korea, Vietnam. Okay. So these were other conflicts that happened, and they were in part they were about what was happening in those countries. They were about North Korea, invading South Korea, trying to take over. They were about some pretty bad folks in Vietnam who were doing some pretty bad things, and the United States got involved to stop these things from happening. We kind of got in their business, Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. It's a question that we still are asking. And so we were on that side, and the Soviets were kind of on the other side, backing those things that were happening. Okay, they were wanting to see more communist governments take over, and we were wanting to stop them. So all these things are happening all over the world, and they involve other people like the Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Cubans. But behind them, the United States is on one side and the Soviets are on the other. And that's what the Cold War was, really. Okay. The next paragraph says the United Nations, or UN, also helps countries avoid war. The UN is dedicated to preventing another world war. The United States helped create the United Nations. So the UN is still something that exists, and it tries to help foster diplomacy. So instead of using troops to settle problems, the UN would like to see us talk about what's going on and just use words. Okay, trying to stop wars from happening. Generally a good idea. Okay, technology takes off. The Cold War was also fought over science and technology. The United States was a leader in these areas in many ways. For example, the nation produced some of the world's most high-tech or advanced computers. Americans led the way with another high-tech invention, television. In 1950, about 4 million American families had the new devices. Just 10 years later, more than 50 million families had TVs. American technology, such as computers and television, was helping to change the world. The Soviet Union was leading the way in the race into space, however. The Soviets put a person into space before the Americans did. The next goal was to put a person on the moon. America won that race. In 1969, 2 American astronauts walked on the moon. So, while putting atomic weapons in Cuba, threatening the United States, wars in Korea and Vietnam, these are bad things, right? People are getting hurt, dying, bad things. But because of the United States and the Soviet Union being so worried about each other, we also developed a lot of technology because we did not want to fall behind. We didn't want the Soviets to have technology that was superior to ours. So we saw the space race happened, right? We put a man on the moon in the 60s. Can you believe that? In the 60s. That seems crazy. If you look at like cars from the 60s, it's hard to believe that we were also sending people into space and getting them back. Okay. So television and just a lot of technology that pushed forward, and I would say really made the world a better place in the long run, happened because of these two countries being very scared of each other. So while there were definitely some negative things that happened because of the Cold War, and we talked about that, it also motivated ourselves as well as the Soviets to develop things that ended up being good in the long run. So some good things did come out of the Cold War. Okay, so just to summarize, to wrap that all up, we end the World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Japan. That ends the World War. It ends World War II, but it also creates tension between ourselves and the Soviets. And so this arms race where it's who's got the most bombs, who's got the most bombs, who's got the most technology, who's got the most technology, who has the best space program. All of these things were happening. This competition, this rivalry, this race that was happening between ourselves and the Soviets went on for the next 40 years. Okay, and that's an important period in American history that we still see the effects of now. Okay, so hopefully that helped make sense of that little chunk of the book.